All right, everybody. So my name's Steve Velazquez. I'm an enterprise sales engineer for Bitdefender. I was formerly a CISO at a large financial services company, and before that I actually had the privilege of doing ethical hacking for a living, which was pretty fun. I got to break into banks and insurance companies and hospitals in the effort to help secure their any holes that I would find. So that was a lot of fun, and we're going to do a little bit of a hacking demonstration in a little bit here. So before we get to that portion of the demo, I do have some slides. I'll try to go through them pretty quick, but there's a lot of cool stuff that is best explained through slides. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Gravity Zone platform in general, our approach to securing endpoints, specifically how we leverage that in the data center, especially large virtualized data centers. Then we're going to get into HVI, which is going to be the subject of the demo, which is a brand new technology just for Citrix, released in March, and something we're really, really excited about. All right, so what exactly is Gravity Zone? So Gravity Zone is Bitdefender's endpoint protection platform. You've got a single management console called Control Center. It can be on-prem, or we can host it for you in the cloud at no additional charge. Just be aware for the HVI demo I'm going to be doing, that does require on-prem. Security for endpoints down at the bottom. These are all things that can be managed from that same pane of glass, that same control center. So security for endpoints is our agent-based security solution for Windows, Linux, Mac. Doesn't matter if it's physical, virtual, server, workstation, it's one unified agent. Security for virtualized environments, that is our hypervisor agnostic approach to offloading a lot of those anti-malware scanning tasks from VMs. We also do have vShield and NSX integrations, but we figured, Citrix customers, Nutanix customers, KVM, they all would love to be able to have that same kind of offloading advantage. So we have this hypervisor agnostic approach to doing that. And actually, even vShield and NSX customers typically pick that model because there's some advantages that I'll talk about. We have an AWS integration, so if you have workloads up in AWS, you can manage all of that from that same exact console. And then we have HVI, which is hypervisor introspection for Citrix.
Are you guys working on the Azure console?
We're working on an Azure integration, but really you could still do it today. I mean, because all of the connectivity is initiated from the agent. So if you install the agent on an Azure machine, it's going to connect back to the console wherever that may be, whether it's in the cloud or whether it's on-premise somewhere, as long as you open up those firewall ports, and then you can manage it like anything else. So big chart here, but this is our approach to security. So we take a very layered approach. The first approach is prevention, right? Let's prevent malware from ever getting to the system in the first place. So there we have controls for device control, prevent users from plugging in USB sticks or other sorts of devices which you may want to deny access to your users. We have a host-based firewall, essentially a Windows firewall replacement. We have application control. That's mostly based around whitelisting and blacklisting. So you can take, let's say, a golden image and say, okay, these are the only executables that should ever be allowed to run on this machine. Everything else is a default deny. Typically, we see this used in server environments or very controlled workstation environments, labs, classrooms, call centers, that kind of thing. Last, we have content control. So that's mostly based around web category type filtering. So we'll block phishing sites, we'll block 55 other categories of sites, anonymizers, adult content, etc. So again, this whole vertical right here is all about preventing the malware from ever getting to the system in the first place. Next, we have a pre-execution layer. So if something gets to the system, we're going to do a signature check. That's kind of just a quick, low-resource way of seeing if something is malicious, if we've seen it in the past. Obviously, with about 500,000 new pieces of malware a day, there's no way that signatures are ever going to be enough. So the next layer is a heuristic system called Behave. It's essentially a little virtual sandbox. Think of it as an emulated Windows environment where we explode that piece of malware. We see what it does. If it looks like it's doing anything malicious, we don't let it run. Now, some malware writers, they try to get around these systems by time bombing their stuff. They say, fine, we'll look innocent at first. We'll wait an hour, a day, a week. Then we'll go ahead, launch our malicious payload. and now we've kind of gone around your heuristics. So our post-execution system, that's called advanced threat control. That's continuous process monitoring. It'll monitor all processes of interest for the entire life of the process. Basically keeps a scorecard on it. Anything that looks suspicious, it remembers it. Hey, it added itself to startup. That looks a little weird. Added some odd registry keys. That's a little weird. Okay, now it's creating copies of itself all over the file system and trying to inject itself into like a protected Windows process. You're now malware. We're going to kill you, and not only are we going to do that, but going to the remediation layer, we're going to remember all those things that led us up to that decision, and we're going to reverse them. We're going to delete all those copies. We're going to take out those registry entries. We're going to take you out of startup. We say we have the best remediation scripts in the business. Last is visibility. You want to know what's going on, so we have a variety of ways to keep you informed as to what's happening, including dashboards, reports, and then you can get notifications in the form of email as well as syslogs, so we can integrate with, you know, third-party SIMs like Splunk or anything else. Okay. Now, there's a lot of talk these days about next-gen technologies. A lot of this is based around machine learning, etc. Bitdefender is a world leader in machine learning research and development. We first started putting this into our SDKs in 2008. We're very, very public about our research on machine learning. So we participate in all of the AI conferences. We have over 30 published papers on machine learning, over 7 approved US patents. If this is the kind of thing that excites you, if you're a security person, definitely check out research.bitdefender.com. There's some really good stuff there. And you know, our company is a little light on marketing sometimes, but very, very heavy on engineering. I think we have something like 800 engineers, a lot of PhDs that spend day and night just thinking about this stuff. Something that may surprise you, 38% of global cybersecurity solutions are using Bitdefender software in some form or another. We have, I think, around 120-something OEM partnerships. So names that might be familiar to you, FireEye, they're using Bitdefender under the covers. F-Secure uses Bitdefender under the covers. It's very well vetted, mature technology that's respected and used by a lot of companies. If you include all of those relationships, we're protecting over 500 million users across the world. The reason this is important, especially when you get into heuristics and machine learning, is part of machine learning is the strength of the algorithm, but the other half is the sample size that you give it, right? You have to give it lots of samples of both good things and bad things so that it can learn and learn to distinguish what's truly malware and what isn't. So when you have 500 million endpoints reporting to you on a daily basis, things that they're finding out there that are suspicious, that makes our machine learning algorithms the best in the world. All right, so how do we leverage this in the data center? So Scott earlier was talking about a solution where they were able to put something out there that would analyze malware on one machine and therefore it didn't have to analyze it now on all the other machines. I don't know what he bought, but hopefully it was Bitdefender because we do the exact same thing. So in the past, if you wanted to do offloading, usually the only game in town was vShield or NSX. Yeah.
Stop talking about why that's so important to offload that.
Yeah. So obviously it's part of the reasons people went to virtualization, right, is to save on resources, to deduplicate effort. So suddenly if you have every machine, let's say you have 100 VDIs, you've deployed some new software to your 100 VDIs, it's completely wasteful to have each one of those doing the same exact analysis on that file. And it's really going to consume a lot more resources than you have to. Plus, if you're doing any kind of signatures, even like us, we don't depend on signatures. We detect 99.7% of threats even without our signature layer, but we do still use them. You're now duplicating those signatures on every single one of those endpoints. So if you can offload all of that, that's obviously going to save a ton of resources, and that translates into real savings in terms of physical hardware. Is that what you were getting at, or did you want to? Yeah, please.
Well, the reason why that's important, and I'm sure Scott can back me up on this, is that's always been important, that we don't want virtual machines scanning all the same things over and over again. We all get that, right? Exactly what you just said.
Yep.
When we start talking about one-to-one virtual desktops now, take that problem exponentially times 10 or whatever it is, make it worse.
Yep.
So while it's important to have this concept in virtual machines in general, servers specifically, when you start talking about desktop virtualization, it becomes exponentially more important.
Yep.
To not waste workloads on scanning the same thing over and over again.
Absolutely.
That's
Agreed.
all we're really trying to make sure we vet it out, that we don't miss the mark. Talk about virtual desktops are worse than virtual servers when it comes to antivirus needs.
Absolutely. Yep. Agreed. And this is really where, I mean, we get a lot of interest in this in both the servers and the VDI world, but especially in the VDI world. So the approach that we take, again, you know, it's a little bit different than these vShield or NSX approaches. It is hypervisor agnostic, and the reason we're able to do that is we're not depending on any kind of special hypervisor APIs. This is all network traffic between this special virtual appliance that's doing all the offloading and that same exact agent that we would install everywhere else, except we put the agent into a special mode called centralized scanning mode. In that mode, all the signatures reside on the SVA, and all of the behave analysis, that first level of heuristics, actually occurs on the SVA itself. Now, if you want to do the ongoing process monitoring, you want to do some of these other controls like web content filtering, etc., that could still run on those VMs, and so that's why it's kind of valuable to still have the option to have an agent on there. And then the other thing I tell people too is people get a little bit tricked in a way when VMware says, hey, we have an agentless solution. It's not agentless. There's still a vShield endpoint driver on that machine. That vShield endpoint driver doesn't really have the full capabilities of something like advanced threat control where you're doing ongoing process monitoring. That vShield endpoint driver, you know, is really mostly doing file system type scanning. Other advantages that we have with this hypervisor agnostic deployment, other than the fact that obviously you can run it on Xen, is you're not required to have one of these SVAs on every host like you would with something like a vShield or an NSX. Since it is just network communication, as long as you've got decent network connectivity, this thing could be on a different Xen server. So you could have 10 Xen servers, deploy 5 SVAs, put them in a pool, put a policy to all your VMs and say, hey, you can use any of these 5. If you have to take one of those Xen servers down, you're doing maintenance, adding memory, whatever, it's just going to use one of the other 4. So you've got redundancy, and you're not forced to put one of these on every host. So those are some nice advantages there. Sometimes people say, oh, you're doing heuristics on all these executables off the VM. Isn't that going to result in a lot of network traffic? It's actually not. The agent is smart enough to take small fragments of the executable that it needs for analysis. So in this example here, it shows about 10%. In reality, I've heard it's actually smaller. It's usually about 7%. So we'll take just enough fragments of that executable to be able to kind of figure out, based on a wide variety of metrics, whether this is something that we think is malicious or not. And then kind of going back to the point that we just discussed earlier, you can have, you know, let's say 2 different VMs down here. They both get file number 1. It sends it up to the SVA to do its checking. It checks signatures. It does heuristic checks. And if it decides, hey, this thing is A-OK, VM number 2, when it reports that same file, it already has a cache that says, I just checked that thing a few seconds ago. I know it's OK. I'm not going to go through the processing effort of rechecking it. So not only do you not have all the individual VMs rechecking it, but you don't have the server that's doing the offloading rechecking it. So again, significant reduction in CPU, RAM, I/O activity. Last piece I'll talk about here is, I don't know if has anybody here ever used Login VSI? So, yeah, so it's a kind of the gold standard benchmarking tool for looking at basically the impact of different configuration changes and applications and in VDI environments. So what we did here was we did a joint presentation with them at VMworld last year. And we showed, there's a white paper on this if you want to see the exact testing methodology, the hardware we used, etc. But up here you had, on a given set of hardware, over 240 VMs without any AV. Once we added our centralized scanning client, it dropped down to 230 something. And then you start seeing a lot of these other solutions, some of which are vShield only, some are multi-platform and would be Xen type solutions like McAfee Move. I think Kaspersky also has one. But in the end, you can see that our VM density was way higher than any other vendor out there. The second test here that's worthy of note is this baseline response time test. So how quickly does that VM respond? once you have this agent on there. So the shorter the bar, the faster the response time. And again, we had the fastest response time in this type of scenario. So very, very cool technology. You know, we've deployed this out to environments with tens of thousands of VMs that specifically chose us because of the returns that they saw in their hardware investment here. All right, a couple slides here on HVI, and then I'll show you a cool demo. So in a nutshell, what's HVI? It is a revolutionary new security layer, and I don't use that term lightly, developed with Citrix over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's designed to defend virtual environments against advanced attacks through the use of a technique called hypervisor memory introspection. It is completely agentless, so no Citrix agent, no Bitdefender agent, there is nothing on the guest VM whatsoever. All monitoring is done from outside the VM at the hypervisor level. So attackers can't hide from HVI, and of course it's going to have really minimal performance impact on the VM because there's nothing on it. First people to have accomplished this used to be considered impossible to do. We're looking at raw memory on the hypervisor to determine if there's something funny going on that VM. It's completely signatureless, so it's designed to detect and stop attack techniques as opposed to looking for specific malware. There are billions, actually I think our database of malware is over 1 trillion samples of malware that we have at our labs. But despite that, they're using the same techniques over and over and over again. You know, they're using buffer overflows, they're using DLL injection. There's only so many techniques for running exploits against the system, and so that's what we're looking for. This does complement any other endpoint protection platform or other security solution, regardless of brand. Obviously, we would love you guys to use our stuff, but if you're using something else and you just want to supplement that with HVI, you certainly can, because again, there's nothing on the VM. It's operating outside of it. It's just going to give you an added layer of security. And last but not least, it's important to note this does require Xen 7 because we're taking advantage of the direct inspect APIs to accomplish all of this. So what does it look like? So here we have a Xen 7 hypervisor, the direct inspect APIs, got a bunch of guest VMs here, and then we stand up an SVA just like we use for security for virtualized environments. It's actually the exact same SVA, except in an HVI environment, it'll talk to these direct inspect APIs, look at raw physical memory, and look for any type of activity in there that looks like an exploit of an application, an exploit of operating system files, any kind of funny business. And at that point, it can instantly stop the attack. It can even then, if it makes sense, it can inject a little bit of code, remediation code, into that VM to do cleanup. It does its cleanup, and then it deletes itself and removes itself from the VM. Very, very cool. So kind of in this slide, I'm showing protecting an entire VM, but another common use case for this that we've gotten a lot of interest in is using this just to protect the browser experience. So most browsers are kind of the Achilles heel of most organizations. That's how most organizations get hacked. There's a lot of different browsers that people will run in their environments. People run different plugins. We've all seen Flash Player vulnerability issues. We've all seen Adobe Reader vulnerability issues. I'm a big LastPass user. The Google security team just found a major vulnerability in LastPass. So it's very difficult to keep browsers secure. And it's usually what hackers are going after in terms of going after users in an organization. They're going to send out phishing emails. They're going to use malvertising, as we call it, basically fake ads on the internet that direct you to sites that have some type of malware that'll take advantage of a browser vulnerability or a browser plugin vulnerability, and you get infected. So if you don't want to virtualize the entire machine, one other way to go about this is run Xen 7 with HVI, run XenApp, and then go ahead and publish your web browsers. And now you have a very, very highly secure browser experience for your users without having to necessarily virtualize the entire desktop. So again, just depends on your preferences and how you kind of want to approach things. All right, so with that, jump into the demo here. that's a bit of an eye chart. Let me make it a little bigger. So within the Gravity Zone appliance, we have integrations with Active Directory, so you can view all your machines. We have integrations with Xen, with vCenter. So what we're looking at here is essentially a Xen server view. And so here I have my Xen 7 machine, and I've got a Xen 7 SVA. That's a security virtual appliance. That's that machine that we deploy to do the offloading, or rather to do the hypervisor introspection in this case. And then I've got this Windows 7 machine. Now this machine, if I look at it here, and I look at the policy, it has no active policy. So right now it is currently unprotected. There's no agent on it whatsoever. I don't have HVI turned on it. It's basically just in my inventory, but it's not protected. If I go over to this box, we can see that this guy here, he's really not like the most security conscious person in the world. He put his bank details on his desktop, and he's basically not the most safe person. So we're going to take advantage of that. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of something called Kali Linux, but it is a really cool Linux distribution for hacking. A lot of fun. It's got this one application on it called Metasploit, which I'm spinning up right now. It's essentially a attack platform. You can see here it has 1,637 exploits in my particular environment here. And I am going to load up a specific exploit that takes advantage of an Adobe Reader vulnerability. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling it, set up a server, a little web server, listen on port 80, using this particular exploit. And if somebody hits this server, it's going to download a specially crafted PDF. When that Adobe Reader plugin in the browser reads that PDF, I'm basically going to own that guy's machine. All right. So right now, server started. It's just waiting. At this point, if I was the hacker, right, I could send out phishing emails. There's lots of different ways that I could potentially get somebody to try to go to that site. So if I go back here, I'm going to open my web browser, and let's say somebody sent me this link. Congratulations, you've won free Netflix for life. Claim below, click below to claim your prize, right? I'm sure none of you would do this, but obviously lots of people do. So I click on this thing. A PDF looks like it's about to start coming up. If I go back to Kali, you'll see here, sending crafted PDF right there, right? So sending a crafted PDF, it's starting to do its thing. You can see successfully migrated to Explorer.exe as Win7x64 as Velazquez. And if I now look at my sessions, I've got a session on that machine. So what can I do here? Let's say I want to interact with this guy. Oops, helps if I spell sessions correctly. Oops. There we go. I can see what directory I'm in. I'm at the desktop. What kind of files are in here? Oh, bank details. That looks interesting, right? So we'll check out bank details. And there we go. I've got information. Now, at this point, I could go ahead and try to escalate privileges, become administrator on the system, etc. But this isn't really a hacking demo, so I'm not really going to get into that. The point is, this is how easy it is to do it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and exit this session. I'm going to make sure that these sessions are killed, right? Killing all sessions. I have nothing here now, no active sessions. And let's go back to this guy, and we're going to assign a policy. I'm going to assign HVI on. So this will take a second to apply. So while that's doing that, I'm going to kind of show you what this policy looks like. Now, again, this is a single console for everything. So whether you're doing the security for virtualized environments with the offloading, whether you're installing this on physical machines, whether you're doing AWS, whether you're doing HVI, it's a single pane of glass. So we say it's complementary, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, a lot of people want some of those other supplementary controls, right? They want the content filtering, they might want device control, they might want the firewall, things like that. But even beyond that, this is looking at exploit activity. So let's take something like ransomware. Most ransomware gets on a system through some kind of exploit, but not all ransomware. Somebody might send you a piece of ransomware in an email just as an attachment. You might download it and run it. It didn't exploit anything. Didn't have to exploit an application or anything else. It's a valid application. It's an encrypting application. HVI wouldn't potentially catch that. It would catch how they may have gotten you to get it if they exploited your browser to do it. So, so we consider it supplementary. Plus, let's say you get something and the exploit gets stopped by HVI, but that file is still there. Maybe you didn't turn on the remediation to kill it, and now you spread that file to someone else. There's some reasons why you might want to have both. That being said, I've had customers that said, you know what, we have a very tightly controlled VDI environment. We don't need device control. We've got content filtering at our perimeter using a Barracuda or web sensor or whatever. So really, we're not concerned about all that. HVI is enough for us.
Let's also talk about the fact that Scott probably back me up on this. Their VDI desktops, I bet most of them are non-persistent anyway. That may be, you probably shouldn't say exactly what you're doing at this point, but that may be the security posture of the moment, right? There may be no antivirus. In a lot of cases, there's not. But if we move back to persistent image, that plus this solution.
Yeah, and I mean maybe you consider those two enough. I'm not a big fan of that strategy of saying that because they're not persistent, one can't worry, because even that one event until that machine gets rebuilt could cause a lot of damage. It could spread. You could steal user data. So I still think that you need more than that. But I hear your point, and some people do feel that way. Yeah. I'm a very paranoid guy because I know what can be done. I spent years breaking into companies that you'd be amazed. Yeah. So until that machine's rebooted, I could have done a lot of things. We used to do this all the time. I would get into a machine, I'd leave a USB stick outside of a lobby of a company in the morning and wait for somebody to walk in and plug it in. I get user level access on that machine, I escalate my privileges, I'm now an admin, then I go after the servers, now I'm a domain admin, and next thing you know, like maybe that machine hasn't been rebooted, but it only took me a few hours and I now took down a bank. And I'm serious, I took down the largest bank in a particular country I can't mention, along with their social security system in a day. So yeah, I would want to protect the machine before the reboot. You definitely don't want to be my enemy. All right, so as you can see here within this policy editor, there's sections on HVI, but there's sections on everything else, because this machine could have an agent on it, and we could be doing both layers, right? We could be doing anti-malware, where we would have on-access scanning, which is the signatures, the behave, the machine learning, the advanced threat control, which is the ongoing process monitoring. We also have a ransomware vaccine. I didn't even really talk about that, but we're the only company in the world that has a specific vaccine that covers most ransomware families. It actually makes it look as if the machine has already been hit by ransomware. Ransomware doesn't want to hit you again because it doesn't want to re-encrypt files that already got encrypted. It wants to maintain the integrity of this business deal that you're doing, right, and get your Bitcoins so they can restore your files. So we decided, okay, well, we got 500 million endpoints reporting to us how all the ransomware in the world operates. Let's take all the markers that they use to detect whether the machine's been infected and pre-populate machines with them to make them all look infected. It's kind of a neat strategy. So we have, the firewall, basically host-based firewall. We have the content control where we're scanning for web traffic, including SSL-based traffic, so we can even see encrypted traffic. We play a little man in the middle with the certificates there. We have the content control here, which is the various categories. So as you can see, it's a really extensive list. Like I said, about 55 different categories that we can block users from going to. The application control, this is the whitelisting. So again, you can take a golden image, create hashes of all the the known good executables on the system and then say everything else deny, I would say that's one of the best forms of anti-malware you could have. Again, this only works on things that are file-based, so things like HVI are going to protect you on things that are not file-based. Exploits that attack browsers, things like that. And then we have the device control where we can block your USB sticks, Bluetooth dongles, wireless dongles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So apart from all that, we have HVI. So in this particular machine, this is the only policy, the only portion that's going to take effect. It's going to ignore all the other areas because there is no agent on that Win 7 machine. So this is the only policy that matters. So we have it broken up into both user space memory introspection and kernel space. So it can be partially automated in the sense that a lot of applications automatically update themselves, for example. So there's like an Office updater package and there's a Google updater package. So you can say, okay, this Google updater executable is considered an authorized updater. So when it goes and updates any Google components, those are then automatically whitelisted because you've said that's a trusted updater. So in that sense, yeah, you can automate it. So here, we can kind of define different processes that we want to be monitored. And, if I look at browsers here, there's all kinds of monitoring mode options. This gets pretty technical, but we can look at things like, hey, are there DLL injections occurring? Do we see a process that's trying to unpack or decrypt that executable to figure out how it works so that we can then go ahead and attempt a buffer overflow or something else against it so we can detect that it's trying to unpack those executables and stop that. Other types of exploit activity, whether something is trying to hook into network DLLs, so therefore we're trying to protect the integrity of your network communication here. And then actions down below of what we would do when we see this activity. So default action, deny, kill it. Remediation action, if it's applicable, disinfect, which is where we would inject that little piece of code into the VM temporarily, do the cleanup, and then delete itself when it's done. Very similar things in the kernel space, just kind of some different monitoring mode options that are a little bit at a deeper level. So here we're looking at, somebody trying to mess with anti-malware drivers or Citrix drivers, messing with other types of critical tables and registers that the OS uses. And then also both of these sections have checkboxes where you can have HVI log additional driver events, OS failure events, application events, and these would typically be used for people that want to do really detailed forensics after the event has occurred. All right, so if we go back to the network view here, let me just make sure that this guy, this guy is now protected. So now we see HVI active, protection. We can see the SVA that he's currently connected to. That's that one that we looked at earlier. Both user and kernel mode on, and the policy. So now, if I go back to this machine, let's go ahead and close this IE session. And just open it back up. So that last hack kind of takes over and crashes IE a little bit. And we'll go back to this site now. We'll click on the Netflix link again. We'll go back to Kali. We'll see sending crafted PDF. Now last time, by the time I clicked over to Kali, this was already like 4 lines up. As you can see, we're sitting here waiting. Nothing is happening. It sent the PDF over, and at that point, HVI intercepted that something odd was going on, and it essentially killed the process. So this thing will just sit here and wait forever. It was essentially a failed exploit. Again, we did this without any kind of security software whatsoever on that VM. Just really, really cool. Did kill IE in the process, but it was trying to take over IE, so a small price to pay. Now, last thing would be reporting. So obviously, you're going to want to be able to learn about the things that are happening here. So we have reports on everything: anti-phishing activity, device control, policy compliance, etc. But we're going to run an HVI activity report. You can do these now. You can schedule them, have it emailed to you every morning. You could pick specific targets. Maybe I just want to see HVI activity in a particular Xen server or a particular data center. We're going to do it for everything. Going to generate this report. And let's sort here by last detection. So let's look at this deny over here. And you're going to get really detailed information about everything that IE was doing, all these different process IDs, all the DLLs it was loading up. If we scroll down far enough, and again, I turned it on with sort of the verbose logging, but eventually you'll get to this extended page table violation, where it's going to tell you that, hey, an attempt to write inside a non-writable page or to execute code from a non-executable area was made. And if I click on IE itself, I can see information down at the bottom that'll give me stuff like process privileges and all the SIDs associated with that process. For some people, this might be more than they want. For security teams that are pretty mature and do a lot of forensics, this is really, really valuable stuff. All right. Questions?
So Bitdefender had the luxury of growing up in a world of virtualization. And I've got two stories I can tell, but I'll tell one real quick. I've got a neighbor in my old neighborhood that works for McAfee. And 2 summers ago, I was at the pool with him, and a conversation came up about what I do for a living. And I said to him something about VDI, and I had to stop and explain to him what VDI was. So I knew we were at an interesting moment there. And then when I started talking to him about his product McAfee Move, which is their virtualization solution that they built out of their traditional solution. And he argued with me for about 5 minutes that they didn't have a product called McAfee Move. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, I get that you guys don't even get this space.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, I already knew Bitdefender, but that's Bitdefender's been our choice for the virtual antivirus solution, security solution for virtual desktops for a couple of years now. And my whole point telling that story is some get it, some don't get it.
Yeah.
Bitdefender gets it. And we're talking about virtual desktops, VDI, what have you. It's the only product in the market that actually gets the space and was built from day one with technologies that help in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these other technologies they've kind of just tried to build up on old frameworks. We really started out in the consumer space, and we just really worked super hard on our detection technologies. We feel we have the best detection and remediation in the world, and obviously 120 some other companies agree because they're OEMing our stuff under the covers. So from there, we kind of got to a point a few years ago where we're like, we really want to break into the enterprise space, and virtualization obviously was already very mature already, and so this product was built from the ground up with virtualization in mind. So absolutely appreciate the comments. All right, thanks.